We'll talk about everything recent, and then we'll release it 3 weeks from now.
That's all right. It's all good.
Dustin, you're back. Oh my God.
I'm back. Yes, I took a week off, but I'm back.
I'm so glad you're back, because when you're not here, it goes two ways. It either goes dark and existential, like some of these episodes have been in your absence.
Sure.
Or I roped one of my children into co-hosting the show.
Ah, okay.
Which I also did. So
sure. Either way, sounds fun.
Yeah, I did the Book of Eli episode and the Outsider, and like halfway through that episode, it's just me going like, you see, the thing about believing in God is, and then it's just, it's deep. It is certainly one person talking to himself.
Sure.
For sure.
Stream of consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Like the old days. Sure. But yeah, anyways.
And like you'll be as an old man.
Exactly. I might be doing it now. You might not be real, Dustin.
This is true.
It could very much be that we didn't speak after we graduated college, and I just invented this whole scenario where we have a pod cart together, and we talk about movies.
You're still homeless on the streets of Savannah.
I don't have a family.
You have no family. You have no.
Yeah. No, but even those episodes, I feel like people can still enjoy. They're more like how like when you go to a class and most of the time it's like, here's the thing we're talking about, and one day the professor comes in, he's smoking, and he forgot his umbrella, and he's just like, sometimes there's just no meaning in life, is there? And you're like, what?
What?
And it's like,
are we going to be tested on this? Like,
is this on the final?
Should I be taking notes?
You're just like, no, man. No, it's not.
The type A in the front row is like, no, man, it's not. Furiously writing notes, every word out of his mouth.
Yeah, nothing's on the final, man, and everything is, right? You know what I'm saying? Anyway,
I'm not going to tell you what's on the final, because that's what life is. No one tells you what's on the final exam, and you don't know when it's coming.
And one day it's there, man, and you're either ready for it or you're not.
What are you going to do? What are you going to believe in? What are you going to stand on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You went on vacation.
Yeah, I did.
And it was awesome, I guess.
Yeah, it was a good time. It was, ended up being a staycation, and it was a lot of fun. Like, we just didn't think about work, which is always like the perk of a vacation.
Yeah.
Is like, don't think about work and don't do work. And there you go. And, yeah, no, it was good. And, I needed some time with the kiddo and the wife. And, it was just kind of, I'd been working so much lately, and I'm about to work even more. And so leading up to the end of the calendar year here. And so, yeah, man, it's crazy. But yeah, so it was much needed, and it was good. So.
Well, I've been watching a ton of movies.
Sweet.
I'm doing better in the evenings when it comes to being drowsy or not drowsy. And so I've been chipping away at stuff. Yeah, dude, I've just been sort of doing the do around here. And
the regular do, or like Code Red? Baja Blast.
Code Red. Code Red. Yeah.
Code Red.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a story about Code Red. When I was, this was probably like middle school. When I was in middle school, one of my friends had a birthday party. Mm-hmm. And so at the birthday party, it was mostly unsupervised. Like, his parents were there, but they were like, yeah, whatever. And they had a pool in the backyard, like an above ground pool. And so the parents just kind of like set a cooler out with a bunch of like drinks in the cooler, like Cokes and whatnot. And And so anyway, we were just hanging out by the pool, and I had a Mountain Dew Code Red for the first time. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is the best thing I've ever tasted in my life. And so I had another one, and then I had another one. And then everyone started commenting on the fact that I'd had 3 Mountain Dews. And I was like, well, I'm just going to have all the Mountain Dews then. And so I think by the end of the party, I'd had like 12 Mountain Dews. And his mom told, I left. I don't know what kind of child I was at that point. Like, was I super hyper or whatever? I don't know. I wasn't conscious enough of my actions, but I had 12 Mountain Dews and went home. And then the next day at school, my friend told me that his mom said I was never welcome back at their house again.
Because you drank all their Mountain Dew.
Because I drank all their Mountain Dews.
My friend, I had a similar experience. So my childhood friend, his name was Sydney, and he lived a street over from me. And so I'd walk to his house. It was in the 90s. So you just could leave your house and walk down the street.
Yeah, exactly. And, there were no killers. No, in the 90s.
Right. So I went to Sydney's house all the time. I went after school some days. I went on the weekend, like every weekend. That dude, I was hanging out with that guy. It's where like I played most of the video games I played because he had more than one console, and watched movies I wasn't allowed to watch, and and they had all these snacks I wasn't allowed to eat, like Dunkaroos and stuff. It's the same experience. I just ate all their food all the time. I would just go into their pantry and just brazenly eat their food. And and it was one of those things where they were so polite that his mom was never like, hey, stop eating our food. But like she would probably tell him later, like, hey, try not to let him snack all the time because he's just eating our snacks. And so like it was one of those things where he just sort of casually made a comment one day like, why are you always eating? And then like it dawned on me like, oh my God, I've been friends for like 8 years. I've just been, it's only now dawning on me I just eat your food all the time. And
you only like me for my food.
and the thing is, Sydney was like really skinny. So like in retrospect, it's like, was I starving him? So last year, or the year before that, it was sometime last year, because I was not using Facebook. I was before I got off of it for the most part. And at some point, I got hacked. And a bunch of people messaged me and was like, they're sharing like this weird like diet thing or whatever on your page, And like it was some pictures of like some girl who'd lost weight, like before and after pic, standard.
Sure.
Yeah. And so my response once I sorted it out was to post like, thanks everybody for letting me know. And I appreciate you supporting me on my weight loss journey or something like that.
Yeah.
So a bunch of people commented. And Sydney was one of them, and he said something like, "You look great," and so my reply to him was, "All I had to do was stop eating all your food," and he laughed at the comment, and I hadn't thought about it until he said that, and it flooded back. All this shame came back to me, like oh, I am genuinely so sorry. And then like 2 weeks ago, I ran into his mom at Costco, and I was like, Barbara. And she's like, how are you doing? And I didn't say it and I feel like months ago I would have like said something, but I wanted to be like, I'm really sorry for always eating your food.
Let me buy your cart of groceries today.
I felt so terrible and do now once again, but a little less each time. I think I need to confront this.
Yes.
Anyways.
If you could see the third person perspective of that, she had 2 carts and she saw you and hid one of them.
She was like, "Oh no!" She's like, "It's Connor." She just covers her cart like
it's the
like she's in prison. Yeah.
A random guy was walking by and she's like, "Take this cart, take it, go."
She's like, "If I can't have it, nobody can." She just throws all the juice down. It shatters. No. Oh boy, if Cliff Bars had existed back then, I'm sure they would have bought them. I'm not sure I would have eaten all of them.
Yeah, they would be gone.
I just do this now to my kids. Like I've taken this abusive behavior and instead of doing it to my friend and his parents, I just take
That's the dad tax.
Yeah, I just pass it on to my children. And that's the healthy way to do it. Right. And we'll buy those Cliff Bars or those Fig Bars or whatever. And I walk over and eat some of it. So sometimes I'll get the Nutri-Grain bars and they're always like, why do you get these? Like, we don't like these as much. And my secret answer is I need to not be tempted to eat them.
Yeah. Right.
And take them from you because I have no self-control.
Yes.
These organic snacks don't taste like the shit that they are.
Yep.
So I eat them and I justify it. And then I wake up and they're gone.
Oh no.
Oh no.
That's what my son does. Every time either Sarah or myself or anytime we're eating anything, he's like, I'll have some of that. Thank you. Give me some of that. I'll take some.
So he's a big eater now.
Oh, dude. Cannot stop. He has not eaten anything that he has not liked. Every single thing that goes into that guy's mouth, he's like, yes, this is the best thing I've ever had.
It's something about those Q4 babies, man. I don't know, because Riley does the same thing. Riley's the best eater we've ever had.
Yeah.
He's number one. He eats everything.
Yep.
He eats salad. I give him salad and he'll eat it.
Yeah, Dash
I gave him
too.
a piece of Caesar salad the other day. And he's put it in his mouth and he literally went, mmm.
That's what Dash does. I made some corn on the cob yesterday and he was like, I'll have some of that, and literally ate it off the cob. And I was like, okay. And he's just like, oh no.
Sometimes you're like, they're a little too enthusiastic and it's like, are you being a wise ass? Do you really like this salad? Is this going to get spit out in a few seconds? Yeah.
So good.
And you're like,
I have fancy food.
Here it comes.
Corn on the cob.
Here comes the spitting out, and he just like eats it, and he whines and wants more.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yep.
I love it.
Same thing. Yeah.
I love it.
I'm like,
he eats he's like spicy pretzels. He eats like just like ground beef. He just eats. And then he complains when there's nothing else to eat. We got them these little shoes, like these little, like, I don't know if Dash has these, but you have like the what are they called? It's like, they're sort of like Crocs, but they're not Crocs. I forgot what they're called. Anyway, they're outside shoes that have a bunch of holes in them, and you don't wear socks with them. I'm blanking on the name. It starts with an S. Anyway, we got them. We always get them a new pair for Easter. Shoes. The things on your feet starts with an S.
Starts with an S.
Don't wear socks with them. Alex, I think it's shoes.
Could possibly be sandals. I think they have soles.
You know what? That's hilarious. I just remember what they're called. Doesn't begin with an S. They're called natives. I guess it ends with an S.
Gotcha. Okay, close enough. Close. Sure, why not? Sure.
Anyway, he's putting those on and they fit his feet, but his ankles are so fat that I can barely get his feet in them. Like I'm shoving his little feet into them every morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I told my wife, I was like, we got to give him another pair. They're too small. She goes, too small on his toes? I said, no. His legs.
Right.
His cankles.
He got them cankles.
He got them. So I don't know. Hopefully he's gonna they'll thin out soon. I don't know if him eating salad contributes to his large ankles.
Well, as he grows longer, perhaps the cankles will become ankles.
This might be as tall as he gets. It might all be sideways from here. Those kids lean out though, dude. Like it's all a cycle. Like they get tall and lean, and then they fill out, and their body has enough, and so they push it all up, and so then they get taller again.
Yeah,
just out, tall, out,
ebb and flow,
and tall. Yep. Well, speaking of ebb and flow, somehow this is episode 401 of the Hoopercast.
Yay!
We did it. We made it over another arbitrary goal.
I was going to say, I don't remember ever having the goal to hit 400, but cool. Yeah.
But it's a thing. And so we should mention it, as we presumably did in the last episode. But that's not here yet in record time.
Record world.
So, and it's weird. I have this habit lately, man. I'm turning everything to like this statement about death. And so like, I couldn't help but think like, as soon as I said that, we passed another arbitrary goal. And my next thought was like, yeah, man, like life, you know, we've passed another arbitrary milestone that has meaning because we gave it meaning. But by itself, it has no meaning.
Sure.
It is what we make it.
Sure.
I just thought of an inappropriate movie quotes that I will now tell Dustin, but I will cut out of the episode right here. And we're back.
No comment.
Anyways, some things are funny, and we're not allowed to say publicly that they're funny.
Yes.
All right. Anyways,
that's true. There you go. They used to be funny. They're still funny.
Still funny, but on the record, no,
they're not funny.
Not funny at all.
Not funny.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. We're not.
We're not. No,
we're
what?
Not.
No.
What? No, ma'am.
Did you like The Happening better than A Knock at the Cabin, or was A Knock at the Cabin?
I never even saw The Happening.
Oh, you never saw-
I never even saw it. I've seen that scene because everyone has seen that scene, but I never saw it.
So so when someone says, Dustin, what's happening? You're like, I don't know. Okay.
I don't know. I've never even seen it. I hear it's terrible, but I don't know.
You open Twitter and there's that the status field there.
Happening?
What's happening? You're like, stop asking me, and you punch the computer.
I didn't know in 2009, and I still don't know.
I certainly don't know now.
So my wife and I have been quoting this over and over and over. And I don't think either of us have ever actually seen this movie, but there's a movie from 2006 called Barnyard. It's an animated movie. Did you ever see this?
Barnyard.
This is really random. Barnyard. I think it was a Nickelodeon movie.
It rings. It's not Back at the Barnyard, is it?
I think that was the series based on the movie.
Okay. Got it. Oh boy.
And so there's this line from this movie that is the best worst line reading I've ever heard. And we quote it all the time. And it is what you just reminded me of. Listen to this quote. Hold on. So in the scene, there's a woman knitting, and I guess she owns the farm with her husband. And so the cow is sneaking around outside of the window, and she says to her husband, who's sitting beside her, like drinking a beer, like, I just saw a cow. There's a cow outside. And this is the line reading he gives.
Randall, there is a cow outside.
There's a cow farm. You're going to find cows outside.
No, I mean...
And that's
outside,
it.
Right outside.
It's a cow farm. You're going to find cows outside. I don't know why he says it that way. and we laugh at this so often. It's a cow farm. You're going to find cows outside. I don't know why he says it that way.
A line reading like that does remind me of my friend Sydney, incidentally.
Really? Okay. All right. Full circle.
Things like that. He would say things like that all the time in that sort of cadence.
Gotcha. Like when you said, do you have any more Twinkies? And he said, it's a pantry.
In the pantry.
Of course, we got Twinkies in their pantry.
Get on pantries? A lot of it was influenced by like the small soldiers.
Yeah.
or Evil Gadget, it's a clip-on gadget. Yeah, he was like the king of like out of context, bizarre sounds and phrases and noises.
Gotcha.
My first exposure to such behavior, and perhaps a large part of why it's such a big part of my personality today.
Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping on this episode, if not just to catch up with you since you've been away.
Yeah.
We never talked about The Last of Us.
No, we didn't.
I had big plans for The Last of Us because I knew we were all watching it.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things that never happened, like all of us getting together to talk about it. And then, we were coming up on 400 and I was like, man, it's been like weeks since The Last of Us finished. And I kept I had it on my sheet and I had like written thoughts out and I was like, all right, I'll try to address this soon.
Sure.
So I just wanted to briefly talk about it.
If you don't think there's hope for the world, why bother going on?
You haven't seen the world, so you don't know. Keep going for family.
I'm not family?
No. You're cargo.
Why are you so important?
Somewhere out west. They're working on a cure.
I'm taking you with me. Do what I say when I say it.
You got any advice on the best way west?
Yeah, go east.
If you've come this far, then you know
what's out there.
You're not gonna scare us.
Scared him?
You have a greater purpose than any of us could have ever imagined.
Be careful who you put your faith in.
It might not be her father, but you're someone's.
You trust me?
But we all watched The Last of Us on HBO whenever it first started airing. I think you watched a lot of it, binged a lot of it, right?
Yeah, I held off until I think there was maybe 9 out.
Mm-hmm.
Was there 10 total?
I think there was 9 total.
9 total. So
Yeah.
I waited until the 8th episode.
Okay.
And once the 8th episode was available, I watched all 8 and then watched 9.
Watched 9.
Yeah.
And had you played the video game?
No, I hadn't.
Okay.
I mean, it's always been on my list of games to play, but I never have. And I knew there's 2 video games, and
Right.
and John and Kellen both loved both of them.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I will get around to it. I will. And then I just never did.
Yeah, I'd never played the games. I don't have a PS anything. And Sydney would have had it, and I would have played it with him. I'm going to send him this episode. He's coming up so much. I think I waited till episode 2 or 3 was out. They might have released 1 and 2 the same weekend. Anyway, I didn't wait too long. Because I also was listening to the official podcast that they were putting out.
Okay.
I like those. I don't do it all the time, but I did do it with Chernobyl. I think after the series was over, I found that episode. So HBO, for those who don't know, HBO sometimes, not for every show, but sometimes has been producing these companion podcasts for shows, and wherein that HBO content airs on Sundays and on HBO Max, or Max, I guess now as it's called, on Sundays, and then on Monday the episode drops that is the creatives talking about the episode that just aired with a host. So for Chernobyl, I don't remember who the host was, but Craig Mazin, who's also the co-creator, showrunner of this series. I love Chernobyl. I know Kellen loves Chernobyl. Did you ever see Chernobyl?
I never did see it.
I recommend it. It's pretty great. And so that was full of interesting facts and stuff that you and I like here's why we made this creative decision. Here's why this real life fact didn't translate directly to the screen, all that shit. So they had one for The Last of Us also. And so the host was Troy Baker, the voice actor who voices the character Joel in the game. And it was the people who were on every week were Craig Mazin, the aforementioned, and who's I'm sorry, I forgot the guy's name. I don't have this pulled up. The guy who created the game and co-created the series, that would be Neil Druckmann. Okay. And so Craig and Neil co-created the show, and so the two of them were on, and then sometimes they'd have another person on. One of the episodes on, they had the original voice of Ellie, because she appears in an episode. She appears
in the show.
Yeah. So, and so that's just, again, at this point, if people have not watched the show, I'm gonna recommend it.
Sure.
But to talk about why, I kind of have to spoil it. So, so
we can get into some of that.
Yeah. So, well, the reason I like it on a non-spoiler level is it's just at a base level, it's just a really well executed thriller, drama, whatever you want to call it. And reminds me, it's going to remind people a little bit of The Walking Dead to an extent. Which, if you like that, then that's something that, to look forward to. There's a whole lot of really great visual storytelling a la, Taylor Sheridan, kind of filmmaking, because anything post-apocalyptic takes on a semi-Western kind of vibe sometimes. So those sort of cinematic techniques and structure is applied here. And there's a whole lot of really well acted performances and great drama between characters, because it's an inherently dramatic and scary situation that we can all now more personally relate to, having been through a viral pandemic. Show is about a fungal pandemic, which, just so you know, if it were to happen, I don't know that it'd be zombie people, but it would be this bad, because fungal bacteria is so much harder to fight than viral. We'd be effed. And they sort of lay it out in the first scene of the series with the people on the television, where the guy's like, look, the reason we don't have fungal pandemics in humans is because fungi can't survive above 94 degrees, Fahrenheit. And since our internal temperature is 98.6 or whatever, we're good. But what if it were to evolve to do that? Say, I don't know, because of climate change. And that's where you as a viewer, you're like, oh, fuck. That's something that's happening.
We're here.
Right. So it's kind of, obviously that's like the mission statement of, that's just so this is what the show is kind of about. Low key. Obviously it's about zombies and other shit. So anyways, I think the show is really great for those reasons. And it's even better for the people who are familiar with the game or have played the game for a lot of reasons that I'll talk about in a second. But I don't know. Do you agree with what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I think I do recommend it. I'm going to steer clear of giving it a star rating, just because I don't like doing that for shows that are incomplete. Yeah. Right. Like, give me the full show and then I'll tell you what I think about it.
Right.
But yeah, man, like, I think I do recommend it. I mean, it's well executed mostly, and well performed, like you said. Yeah, I mean, it's solid, and I'm excited to see where it goes. What's interesting to me about it is it seems to be built around the trolley problem. And we can get into that a little bit in spoilers, but like it's sort of deeply philosophical in that way of like, hey, let's talk about morality. Let's talk about what's right and wrong. And let's put this in an extreme environment and push characters to have to make some really hard decisions. And that to me is inherently interesting. I do think that the show could have been made better in a few different ways. But I mean, I do, and we can talk a little bit about some of that, but I do think that, that overall it's a well-constructed, well-executed show. So yeah, I do recommend it.
For spoilers now for people. So yeah, people, if you have Max or you have a HBO, well, yeah, the only way you could do it is if you watch it on Max at this point. So yeah. Okay. So if you have Max, you didn't watch it, go watch it. It's all there. And you know, if you're into that that sort of thing, the podcast as well, I enjoyed. So I liked, obviously what felt good about watching it week to week was just the water cooler. I didn't discuss it with anybody. Like, it's not like I was like, oh, cool, now I can talk to people about The Last of Us from last night. But it was more just like, oh, now I can watch like other people talk about it, and I can watch recaps and reactions and stuff. I can just sort of take the temperature on it with other people who are keeping up with it. So I didn't have the social capital, but it allowed me to not have to avoid content. Yeah. But I enjoyed the show. I just really sort of embraced the, as I tend to do, I just sort of really embraced the, I don't know what to call it, except like the ugly truth angle of storytelling. There's a better way to put that, but for me, I'm digging stuff lately that is bleak to an extent.
Sure.
More just because I'm more engaged now as an adult by content that doesn't try to convince me everything's great. And so I relate to situations that seem hopeless because I go, okay, cool. By the end of this, maybe we're going to learn how to learn how to either cope with this or get out of it. And so there's a part of me as an adult that's like, I can't wait to see them overcome this, because then I'll feel like I can overcome things. So what I like about The Last of Us is that we're faced with characters in terrible situations, making terrible choices often. We're gripping that constant question in these types of movies and TV shows where it's like, how do you balance the will to survive with the need to remain a decent human being? You know, what is a life worth living at a certain point? Like, how important is a cause, you know, over your life? What if people depend on you? You know, blah, blah, blah. So there's all those things at play that I really just, the moral philosophy angle of the show, I really enjoy. Of course, that third episode, the Bill and I almost said Bill and Ted. What's this guy's name? Bill and Frank episode with Nick Offerman was a huge episode. I thought it was terrific and heartbreaking. And of course, when you're going to use On the Nature of Daylight as a piece of music, you're going to get me just screaming tears. Holding my pillow.
Yep.
And I thought that the season ended in an interesting way. It does that thing where you got a penultimate episode that's going to have way more action, way more things happening. And then you're going to have a final episode that's a whole lot of thoughts about that. And if it's the end, like Breaking Bad, you have Ozymandias, which is like the episode where tons of things happen. People die, things are found out, choices are made. There's a point of no return in that episode. And you're like, oh my God, that was crazy. And then there's like a couple more episodes after that where there's less things, but all the drama can now play out, and that's engaging. And I didn't feel the same dramatic satisfaction at the end of this season that I did at the end of like Breaking Bad, you know, wrapping up an entire show. But I did feel this like, okay, cool. We're still going on the human drama. We're ending on a high note emotionally. And it's still true to character. You know, Joel lies to Ellie about what he did and what exactly he got her out of while she was put under.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's a huge thing now, but we know that it's a big choice he's making. We know that we can tell she knows he's lying. And we know that that's a big deal because now she can't trust him. And we know why he's lying, because he's not ready to tell her the truth about the decision that he made without her. So that's satisfying to me. I think that's good TV.
What I think is satisfying most about it is whether you agree with Joel or not is beside the point. The point is that you logically understand how he arrived at his decision. Mm-hmm. And that's the most important thing, right? Like you could compare this in a similar way, because you brought up Breaking Bad, to Walt's decision to let Jane die, right? Like obviously Walt's decision to do that is all evil. There is no other side to it. I mean, I guess you could argue maybe she was bad for Jesse, but it doesn't really.
That's not what he was doing.
Yeah, there isn't another side to it.
Right.
But the fact is, you as an audience member can understand why they've made the choice they're making.
Yep.
Even if you yourself wouldn't ever make that choice.
Yep.
And that's the most important thing from a writer's perspective is, if I'm going to shock the audience with something, if I'm going to pose a question, I have to make sure they understand why the character did it. And it's not just like propaganda for what I believe, for what my worldview is, right? What I believe is right or wrong. But instead, I'm posing a question and giving you the necessary information to understand why our character arrived at the decision he did.
Yeah.
And to me, that's interesting. Ultimately, you know, I don't know where The Last of Us 2 goes video game wise, but ultimately, you know, like I wonder, would Ellie have been against what he did, ultimately, or is it like, is she capable of understanding that? Like, I understand why you did that. You don't want to lose another daughter. Like, you don't want to whatever. I can understand it. I don't agree with it or whatever. Or does she agree with it? Like, I think all of that's on the table. But I think like you said, the main point there is, well, he lied to me. He looked me in the eyes when I asked him to tell me the truth, and he didn't tell me the truth.
Yeah.
And now I can't trust this guy that I've grown to, I've grown fond of, and it's like a trust that will be broken, no matter which way she goes. Like, again, she's like, yeah, I see why you did what you did, but you still lied to me about it, and that's why the trust is broken. And I think that'll be interesting to watch play out. For me, like you mentioned The Walking Dead, like obviously there's the Walking Dead comparison here. And about halfway through the season, I found myself a little bit checking out because I start to feel like, all right, here's the thing. This is my big gripe with The Last of Us, is it really didn't, other than the nature of the zombies or whatever you want to call them, it didn't really give me anything unique. Not to say it's not well done, but it doesn't give me anything unique. Like the idea of transporting a child who's special to a place, like a strong stoic man escorting a small child to a place. We've seen it a million times.
Yeah.
So nothing new there. We've seen the idea that there's somebody who's immune to a thing, and maybe we can, learn from her some secrets of how to fight a thing. Okay, we've seen that before. And then through The Walking Dead, of course, we've seen the idea of like, now we meet this encampment of people. They seem cool. They're cannibals.
They're not
now
great.
We meet this encampment. Now they're villains. Now they're villains.
Whoops, they're cannibals.
Whoops, everyone's evil. The one reason why I think it works a little bit better here than it ever did in The Walking Dead is The Walking Dead started like months after the fall of civilization, right? Whereas this is we're jumping. What is it between the pilot and this? It's like
10
20 years.
No, sorry,
20
20 years. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, something like that. So it's a little bit easier to understand why people have gone as far as they have into Lord of the Flies land. But like, whereas The Walking Dead, it's like, we've got evil people. Oh, and the world just fell 2 years ago. And it's like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if I buy it. And like that to me is one of the main things. Is I said this about The Walking Dead, I'll say this about this. At a certain point, you stretch the believability of it. And I understand you have to like stick with your tone and you have to, like build your world. But the problem I have with these types of worlds is they start to feel like fantasy and not like a realistic interpretation of what might actually happen. It feels like Middle Earth, but like the bleak apocalyptic version. Like it's fantasy genre at this point, because the idea that like everybody's moved on, everybody is like this weird husk of a person, just starts to ring untrue for me. We've seen that there is this proclivity that human beings have to wallow in nostalgia. You take a look at the room around me. Like, I'm wallowing in nostalgia every day I'm down here. But the point is, like, if civilization fell, there would be this really weird nostalgia for like going grocery shopping, and this really weird nostalgia for just mundane things. And people would really miss that life. And I think what's weird in these worlds to me is that no one seems to mention that. No one really, it's like everyone's just kind of given up. And to me, that's inherently depressing to watch.
Sure.
And like, I like when stories operate in the gray area, but I don't I have a hard time getting behind a worldview that says like, I don't know, everybody is just necessarily evil all the time.
Right.
And so it's just so strange to me. And it starts to feel like taxing to watch. And like, it's like what I always said about The Walking Dead was it seemed a little bit like fetishistic in its, in its violence or in its bleakness. Like they were taking extreme amounts of pleasure in what they could show us that would shock us.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, when a story does that, like you're now, and I think this does a better job than The Walking Dead ever did, but it still kind of hits that same sort of mark. We're afraid to let characters be characters, like real people, and everyone's just kind of like a hollow person that I can't really relate to as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird area to be in, but yeah, I have a hard time finding the humanity in these characters, and maybe that's the point, but I think it also hinders my ability, me personally, it hinders my ability to attach.
That's fair.
But I will say, like, they're pulling out all the stops, right? Like you mentioned episode 3.
Yeah.
Episode 3 is a great example of like, well, let's just tell a human story then. And part of that is, okay, well, it's set a little bit prior to the rest of the season that we're watching. So maybe humanity hasn't quite gone off the deep end. And maybe the point was that Ron Swanson hadn't quite gone off the deep end just yet. Right. Like he was still kind of clinging on to something. He had something to fight for and whatever. And like, that's great. I think story-wise, it was a weird aside that shifted focus from our protagonists, which while it served a purpose, was a little bit of like taking a B plot and elevating it to an A plot at the expense of the actual A plot.
Sure.
So, I mean, there are little things like that bother me, but at the end of the day, like it's still, like I said, a really well done show. And like, again, I say this all the time, you take a show like this and your personal opinions, your personal biases, your personal world experience, lived experience shapes your enjoyment of it. And I could totally see how a lot of people really dig this type of story and this story in particular.
Yeah.
Whereas I think I enjoyed it maybe a little bit less than most people, and that's fine, but it's still like, that doesn't, I'm not out here saying like The Last of Us is trash. Yeah. I think it's great.
Well, I'm looking forward to the next season. I think it was definitely one of those things where, cause sometimes I don't think the bar has been reached with certain shows and from the people who are making them, like, but I felt like it was one of those, it was like, this feels like an HBO show. Like it felt like the kind of quality where it was like, I mean, not to say that The Last of Us will be as good as The Sopranos or anything, but like when you watch it, it doesn't feel like below the standards of HBO in terms of like production design, or anything like that. Like everything's kind of firing on all cylinders. And if you listen to the podcast episode, you got two people who are very in charge, who are very aware of the decisions they're making and very keenly aware of how to tell a story for the medium you're telling it on. And they admit, like, a lot of the decisions they made, they come straight from the game because they were like, this is a perfectly written scene. We don't need to change it,
The giraffe scene.
I said, and there's other kinds of things that are like, yes, this is different in the game, but you have to understand that in the game, it is oriented towards a player trying to shoot enemies, where in a show, you need more drama and you need less of that pew pew and you need a little bit more interaction. And so we did change it for this reason. And, so it's one of those, I'm endlessly fascinated. And I feel like if I ever wrote like if I ever taught some kind of class on the collegiate level, it would be about adaptations, because I'm always, I seem to be drawn to adaptations of existing work. And of course, now our culture is rampant with them. So I've got all this material. I feel like I should just start specializing in it. But like one thing I do like, I'm reading right now. I mean, at the time of recording this, I'm still reading Sharp Objects. In podcast land, it's probably been like 3 months since I first mentioned mentioned that. But like, I enjoy. I go into this heavily. I went into this in the Book of Eli episode in The Outsider. When I was talking about The Outsider, and I said, you know, when something exists, when something's being adapted to the screen, you ought to consume it in its original form first, because you don't have to, but you sort of can say less about the thing overall. If you haven't, you can watch The Outsider and say, oh, cool, like that, you know, but you can't watch The Outsider, then go read the book and say the book is boring. The book is boring because you know the plot outcome and you're not imagining anything on your own because you've seen it already. If you had read the book, you would have pictured the characters, pictured the world, taken in the prose, and been along for the ride of the story beats and been surprised.
Sure.
And then when you watch the show, you'd know how the book went, but you don't necessarily know what choices the show is going to make. You don't know who they're casting. You don't know how you feel about the performances. You don't know how this director saw a book that you read and may have seen it differently or perhaps better. So you're still being surprised, but it has to be in the order it was created. There's a reason certain things exist as books first, because they are best consumed on paper, through prose and not visually, because that's not your perspective. That is another creator's perspective. So when it comes to video games, close, as we said before with Mario, like you can get there. You can create something that's cinematic for a video game, but at the end of the day, the game exists for the player to control a character and move around and do stuff, not always and not principally for drama, you know? Yeah. So I can't comment on the Last of Us video game because I've not played it. Yeah. But from everything I understand about it, it's one of those games that's as close to a mini series as video games can get. Yeah. So of course it lends itself really well to being adapted as a television show because it mostly is. So
it's created by Naughty Dog, who created the Uncharted games. And while I have not played The Last of Us, I have played all the Uncharted games, and they're incredibly cinematic, and B, incredibly like a mini series. You're playing chapters essentially. And yeah, man, the less said about the Uncharted movie, the better. But I was
going to say, it is possible to bungle these things, even when it is possible. Done well originally.
I would love for The Last of Us's popularity to be such that they decide to give Uncharted a series and do it correctly. Yeah. And I would love that, man. But, totally. But yeah, The Last of Us is great. And I do recommend it.
Yeah. Well, okay then. Well, that's going to do it for this one, I think.
Yeah.
We'll pop that on. Put her to bed. Woo. All right. Woo. See you later, everybody.
At the cow farm.
At the cow farm.
Got my cows outside.